Hi, ma'am. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Otis. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. Ma'am, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk and share that good information with us today. We really, really appreciate you taking the time out to do that. It's kind of funny. We connected through a mutual, I guess, social, a mutual social media friend that we have, and I believe it's Major General uh, Dana Petard. So, I'm really
Yes.
thankful that we made that connection, and I'm thankful that we are, having this discussion today on the Bingham's top 10 plus four. But before we go into the Bingham's top 10 plus four, you know, to be quite honest, I'll be frank. You are a legend in the eyes of many in our military communities, and I want to give you the time to just, share your background and share what you're all about, share where you're from, and you've got a lot of eyes that's checking out our discussion right now. So go ahead and feel free, man.
Well, thank you so much, Otis. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you this afternoon. And to your comment, I'm so grateful for the many men and women whom I've had the privilege to team with, to work for, and learn from in my 38 years of service. But when people ask me to what do I attribute all of my success to, I tell them this: all that I am and ever hope to be is but for the love of Jesus Christ, an amazing man and helpmeet of almost 37 years, two great kids, and as we say in down home Alabama, a whole heap of folks who have coached, taught, trained, encouraged, inspired me to successes along the way. For surely you cannot
Mhm.
get there by yourself lest you fool yourself. And I'm very, very grateful to all who have crossed my path. I want to start out first by thanking all who are on the net with us this afternoon. The men and women who have served our nation in the past and currently are serving, I want to say thank you for your service. I never want to pass up the opportunity to do that. And so thank you all very, very much, and your families. I also want to thank all the folks who have been working, trying to help, or working through this pandemic, national response to this pandemic that is ongoing. Our active Guard and Reserve soldiers and service members really across the various services, especially our healthcare heroes, our first
Mhm.
responders, um, all who put service before self. And just a
Mhm.
huge shout of gratitude to each of them for really being on the front lines in front of this pandemic. And I
Mhm.
would say, I know you join me in saying we appreciate all of them for the work they do.
Absolutely.
I also offer my thoughts and prayers to families who have lost loved ones to COVID-19. When it
Mhm.
first started out here, I guess early March timeframe, when it was proclaimed a pandemic, um, we saw the numbers. We were horrified and shocked and incredulously looking at numbers that seemed so surreal. And I'll never forget, my husband lost his own first cousin, and we actually viewed the service on a Zoom meeting call, and it became very surreal and it became very personable for us to see someone succumb to COVID-19. And so we keep all of those families uplifted in our thoughts and prayers, and all who are on the front lines there trying to help find a cure and a vaccine for this devastating virus we find ourselves in. So, shall I go on a little bit about me?
Go on, ma'am. We appreciate the opening words. Go ahead. We like to know a little bit about you, ma'am.
Okay, thanks so much. Well, I am the proud daughter of an enlisted man. My father, Edward McMillan, was married to my mom, Louise McMillan. They were married about 54 years before death parted them. But my dad was an Army medic, and he and my mom were stationed right here in the state of Texas, first at Fort Hood for 10 years. And I remember living outside of Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas. We were in the Marlboro Heights neighborhood, and that's where I got baptized in church and went to elementary school. From there, we moved to, after 10 years, you wonder how someone can stay 10 years in a place, but my dad went to Korea, I think the first time, and came back for 3 or 4 years, and then he went to Japan for a year and came back for 3 or 4 years. But all total, 10 years at Fort Hood, and then we moved to Fort Sam Houston, just in your neck of the woods, Otis. And we stayed until my father retired, right there on BAMC, Brook Army Medical Center field. So all total, I've lived here in the state of Texas for 13 years growing up. And then my father retired. He and my mom and the family moved back to our birthplace, which is Troy, Alabama, where I went to high school and college. I attended college on a 4-year Army ROTC scholarship. And I was actually blessed to have received both an Air Force and an Army 4-year ROTC scholarship. I thought about the Air Force really hard because I knew the Army business was tough business, but then I got scared and said, well, only thing I know is what my dad is, and that's an Army soldier. So I went for the Army ROTC scholarship and promised myself that I would stay in the Army only 4 years. 4 years and not a day longer for this. And I tell people today, oops. I think I fell in love not only with the man I met and married 37 years ago, but I fell in love truly with this vocation called the United States Army. And I will tell you, I am the better for it. By the way, we just had our Army birthday. And happy birthday to all soldiers and veterans out there. You're looking good at 245 years and rolling right along and going strong. So that's great. I'll get into a little bit about my leadership philosophy or the way I treat people when I think of leadership and the way I lead and engage with people by telling 2 stories. And the first story was was a college experience at the University of Alabama. I started out in 1977. Don't call me ancient, but 1977. There's a funny story. If you remind me, I'll tell it. But I was on a 4-year scholarship, and I had been a great student in high school, elementary high school. I had made good grades, and thus the scholarship. And when I started at the University of Alabama, my first year, I had good practices. Go to class, study hard, do your homework immediately after class, and then prepare for the next day. And I did that for a solid 1.5 years. It was a great way to keep up my grade point average. I had a good grade point average and all was well. I began to get into the social scene, though, of college, as many of us have done. And my grades began to slip a bit. I often say that, and I don't blame it on any one thing, I just got enamored with not only my academic studies, but I became enamored with the social scene. And so I pledged my beloved Delta Sigma Theta sorority. I got in a number of student government, a number of drill team, ROTC activities, and I really just kind of got out of kilter. My grades began to slip a little bit. And I knew on a scholarship, that was not a good thing to have your grades slip. So I said, okay, I need to bolster my GPA and get it back to the AB average that I had for actually about 2 years. And I thought, I'll take sociology 101. After all, how hard could it be? I said to myself, you're a people person, you love people, sociology, study of people. I thought it would just be an easy A. And so I tackled my first class, and it was one of those auditorium feel where you had a lot of students in the class. And, the professor shared a lot of information. And so essentially I thought, I'm going to have to really study inside of this class. And I thought I was doing that. So the first days, when the professor kind of gives you the expectations of the course, and he said there will be 2 exams. The first exam is worth 40% of your grade, and the second and final exam is worth 60% of your grade. Well, and I know if I had to do it all again, Otis, I would have dropped that class like a hot potato. I did not do it on Twitter. I thought, okay, we can handle this. Took the first exam. I got a 60. That was a D. And I go, ooh, this is bad. This is definitely not the easy A that I thought it would be. So one of my sorority sisters suggested I go and talk with the professor and ask what I could do differently about the way I was studying for the exam, to change my methodology of study to try to improve my grade ultimately. And I thought that made perfect sense. So I got on the professor's schedule and I went to see him. I went, knocked on his door and entered, and I said, Dr. So-and-so, I said, I didn't do so well on your first test. I made a 60 on the test, and I'm hopeful that you might recommend a different study technique or manner that I might use to help me improve my grade for the final and the second exam. And the professor looked at me, and I can still almost remember his face. And that was many, many years ago, at least 1979, 80 time frame. And he told me these words. Well, it's a known fact that people like you don't do well in education. And I was taken aback. The professor was white, I was black. It's a known fact that people like you don't do well in education. And I was speechless, quite frankly. 30, 60 seconds later, I stood up, I thanked him for his time, and I walked out of his office. And as the tears began to roll down my cheek as I processed on my way back to the dorm what had just happened, I was just stupefied. Here is a white professor who has told me essentially a racist remark, or one certainly I took for that, and offered no help, which is what I went to him for. I saw my sorority sister. Fortunately, they've been such a welcome presence in my life for a long time. And one of my sorority sisters says, hey, don't worry about it, Gwen. You can do better for the next exam. True to fact, I could have quit the course. It was before the drop ad period, but I'm not a quitter. I stuck with the course. I buckled down and tried to study better for the final exam. And I took the final. And Otis, at this point, people would say, what did you get? What did you get? You're looking for the good news, that Rudy story, right? Where I come to you and say, I took the exam, I passed the exam. Unfortunately, that was not the case. I took the exam, and I don't know about you, but have you ever taken a test where you go to question 1, you don't know the answer. Question 2 doesn't do much better. You flip it over on the backside and you go 25, 24, multiple choice. At some point, I felt like it was an eeny, meeny, miny, mo game. I'm not proud of that, but I'm just knew what was running through my mind. Well, I took it, I finished it, I got my exam score back. It was a 55, it's an F, and I have an F on my transcript just to remind me of what had happened on that day in the encounter that I had with the professor. I'll come back to that in a second. Fast forward, I'm now a promotable captain, a major in the Army. And this time, it's not a racial encounter at all, a very pleasant office call I had with a superior officer. But the officer superior said to me, Major Bingham, I can just about assure you that you'll never, ever be seriously considered for battalion command. And I looked at him, I said, sir, why do you say that? He says, well, you don't have enough division time. And division, as you know, and most online, is an operational assignment, operational entity. And I said to him, I said, well, sir, I just want to assure you that I will give you 110% of my best efforts daily. And I believe I did that. Not to bore you with everything I did from the captain to the battalion, but I will say this. What did I learn from the first example? And I use this to be instructive to those who might need it. Because when I've spoken before and I've shared that story, instinctively 2 or 3 always come up and say, you know, that same thing happened to me at, you know, university of whatever. Yeah. But what I learned from that was really what I was made to feel as if I were inferior or if I could not achieve. And I promised myself I would never, ever let anyone under my charge, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, etc., be made to feel that way ever. The second example, where the superior officer told me, I can just about assure you, you'll never, ever be seriously considered for battalion command. I learned never to play God with somebody's life. Yes. Because if a person can conceive it and believe it, with hard work, commitment, perseverance, they can achieve that which they aim to do. I never forgot those 2 lessons, Otis, and I've carried those with me, and I've shared them with those in a way of trying to uplift and encourage them. Don't let anyone steal your joy or steal your dreams. And that's really the message there. I'd like to pause at this point and see if we might have any questions. If not, I'll continue.
We actually do. We actually do have a couple comments and a few questions. When sharing your story, first of all, I don't know if it's a bad thing, but yeah, it's probably horrible that I'm thinking this way, but it's really not a surprise that you went through what you went through, but you still persevered. You know, the lesson of don't dictate someone's reality. You're not a prophet. No one is a prophet. Let people work it out. Let people get to the point where they're trying to go to. That's a empowering thing. So these comments and questions that will be coming, ma'am, they're pertaining to those exact things. So we have some reactions, live reactions from the story. We've got one from Miss Angel Jackson. She said, wow. I think she said wow at the same time I said wow. And when we heard of the professor saying to you, people like you don't make it in education.
Don't do well in education.
That's just horrible. That is absolutely horrible, in my opinion, anyways. So we've got some more comments. We've got someone said we are still going through that today. And
every time I tell that story, like I said, instinctively, at least 1, 2, 3 people come up to me and they share that they went through a similar experience through their collegiate experience. So we know it happened to me, and we know and I hear that it continues to happen.
Side note, ma'am, because I don't know if this was clear from the beginning, but what college did you go to?
I went to the University of Alabama, main campus, Tuscaloosa.
Tracking. So we've got the comments are coming in full blast now. So let's go ahead and read some more of them. We've got one from Dr. Shabazz. How you doing, sir? He said, never to play God. Never try to play God on someone. We fully agree with that, sir. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
He actually also had a question as well. His question was, ma'am, did that shape you the way you went about it in your life? Did it shape how you mentored African Americans?
Yeah, and thank you, Khalid. That's an excellent question. I'm sorry, Dr. Shabazz, and I want to be mindful of your PhD. I know you worked hard for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for the question. It absolutely, both of those 2 experiences together really shape how I treat others, how I lead, and how I engage with people. I am a people person. I say that I'm probably the best cross between my mom and my dad. My dad was a person who never met a stranger. Both of them were well liked, but he, never met a stranger. Always enjoyed meeting people. I'm the same way. My mother was the Christian person in our household who gave me those strong Christian values. I went to church, I went to Sunday school, Bible study, vacation Bible school throughout my early upbringing. But I was so perplexed and amazed during my college experience. I had not really felt racism before in my face like that. And when he said it to me, and he didn't, I mean, his eyes just stayed glued to mine. He didn't crack a smile. He didn't shift a stance. He just looked at me, and that's all he said. And after he said it, he just maintained eye contact with me, crossed his legs, and I guess we would have been sitting there for an hour, but he didn't offer me anything, which was I asked him for assistance, and he gave me none. The one about telling someone what they can and cannot become. So much of that, I mean, that's wrong on so many levels. And what I failed to say, but it's obvious apparently to what my rank is now. The point, as history would show it, I did go on to command that battalion. I went on to command that brigade after that. And praise be to God, in April of 2011, I pinned on my first star. And so the message is to not let anyone steal your joy or steal your dream. Because again, if you can conceive it, you believe it, and you're willing to put in the hard work, the commitment, and you persevere, you can achieve that what you want to. And because both of those resonated with me in such a powerful way, I never forgot those two encounters. And I made sure that as I led as a company commander, battalion, and all up the chain, that I was very mindful of treating everybody essentially by the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. If you remember people with dignity and respect, then you will receive that back. And likewise, you'll elevate and inspire others to be what they can be. I ran across a quote several years ago, probably about 5 years ago. And I remember the author, his name doesn't come to me just yet, but it goes something to this effect. Treat a man, and I like to say, or woman, treat a man as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them become what they are capable of being. Think about that for a moment.
Ooh, I mean, hey, man, it has the hair in the back of my head jumping.
That was so powerful. When I first saw that, treat a man or woman as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them become what they are capable of being. That is so rich. It's so powerful. And I've never forgotten that. And point of fact, many times when I'm mentoring, I'm coaching, I put up that quote. And it really resonates in many of the audiences, particularly when I'm talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Are there any other questions?
There's two more questions on here, and then we could pause the questions at that time, and we could go into the topic of today's discussion, the top 10 plus 4. So let's go ahead and share a couple more comments. Someone said that Miss Angel Jackson, she said she had a similar experience at ILE. Interesting.
Well,
really interesting that.
Yeah, Angel will be interested to chat with you about that sometime. So in any case, I'm sure you grew from that experience, and hopefully you decided and were determined you weren't going to let anyone steal your joy.
Absolutely. We've got another comment coming in saying, I've been told the same. that I did not have enough DIV time and then I would not make it, whomever this person is. I'm sure that that person took the strength from that. Well, I would say not the strength, but the lesson learned from that moment and actually persevered through their career. It kind of, and I will share a personal story as well. You know, it kind of resonates with kind of my military slash civilian career. There's a time where I thought, okay, you know, I'm not going to make it. These things ain't working out. But not listening to the negative voice and actually listening to the positive voice and having those positive influences. Shout out, by the way, to Colonel Calhoun, Ebony Calhoun. Shout out to Colonel House. Shout out to Colonel Shabazz. He's also one. You know, I've got these positive influences in my life, and they've helped me get to the point where I'm at today. So shout out to you all. The other question, ma'am, that came up was, ma'am, how did that failing grade prompt you to do things differently personally, or did it prompt you to do anything differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. I chuckle because I am sure, Angel, that at the time my grades began to slip. Remember I told you that I was enjoying the social side of college and probably had my life out of balance. I was there to be a student. And I think I kind of got more of the social up there and the academics kind of waned a little bit. So what it initially did when I got the F, it prompted me to say, okay, you're on the wrong track. You can't afford to lose your scholarship, because that was what, was how I could afford to go to school. And so it really made me put away some of the social side of my college experience, bring it down a notch and raise up my academics, because that was what I was there for. So I really reshifted, rebalanced my academics to where that was the primacy, it had primacy in my college experience. As far as the professor and giving him any credence, certainly you don't forget things, because it was a teaching point for me in a sense, but it also propelled me to, it lit a fire. It lit a fire inside of me to say, okay, I'm not going down. That. And so I knew I was better than that, better than what he had portrayed. And so it lit a fire, and that fire has been lit and stayed lit. And I was determined that I would finish school with my grades. Certainly, if I couldn't get them back to AB, I would certainly get them back to a very respectable GPA, and I did that. And certainly I was able, of course, to graduate. But it was my first experience that, everybody who doesn't look like you is going to like you. And everybody who doesn't look like you is going to help you.
Right.
I didn't make that a forefront stance, because for the one professor who mistreated me, there were so many great professors that I had, and people that were willing to help me. Can't begin to tell you, the ROTC cadre was superb. And so by and large, I left the University of Alabama with a great experience. Today, I used to run around the Pentagon saying "Roll Tide," and people got tired of me saying that. But I still love my alma mater. It's where I went to school at, and I won't deny that. And so you just learn from those negative experiences, and you make them, you turn them into positives, and that's what I did.
Excellent. So we've got a couple more comments, and then we could jump into Bingham top 10 plus 4. Okay. So we've got Colonel Shabazz. He said, phenomenal, ma'am. I wish I could have been your chaplain. Treat a man or woman if they were ought to be. Wow. Please send us that. I think he's gonna probably take that line and probably put it on a t-shirt. That's a heck of a line, man. Very motivational.
It is. Absolutely. When I ran across that 5 years ago, I never forgot it. And everywhere I use it, people, I used it. I did a workshop twice for the Navy on diversity and inclusion, and the SES who invited me to come and speak, she says she printed that out and she has that in her office now. Of hearing that. So if that can be your battle cry, Dr. Shabazz, by all means, it wasn't mine to begin with, but I certainly will write it down for you if you'd like me to. Be happy to share it with you.
Excellent, excellent. Maybe you can put it in a certain document that is being produced. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little later, ma'am. So we've got one more comment I want to share. One more comment we want to share, and this is from Captain Weaver, Holly Renee Weaver. She said, "Roll Tide. My husband is from Alabama. I love how you turned a negative into a positive. Very inspiring." Thank you for that, Captain Weaver. We really appreciate that.
Holly, I appreciate that. And by the way, guys, for all of you who think I'm old, when I pledged Delta Sigma Theta, I turned 60 last year. But when I pledged Delta Sigma Theta in 1978, Ozzie Newsome was my big brother. And I remember when I was a pledgee, he used to pick at all of us when we were pledging online. So at the time I was there, Ozzie Newsome, and you all know him well, was also, he played football there. Okay, so
yes,
I am.
Let's go into the top 10, man. Ooh,
all right.
Let's go into it. We're excited for it.
So when I became a general officer, I in 2010, I made the cut in August of 2010. I remember the date well. I was in Afghanistan at the time. I cried like a baby. Matter of fact, I could not tell you probably today who was on my list, because my name was, the list is in alphabetical order. I was the second person on the list, and when I saw my name posted, I stopped and cried like a baby. I couldn't even read the rest of the words. And so I just had to put it aside because it felt so surreal that I could have achieved that. And just remembering back to, the university experience, and remembering to the, what the senior leader told me as a promotable captain, and here now I'm a promotable colonel. It was just so real. But I tell anyone, again, never say never, because if it's for you, it will be there. But many people ask me in my initial journey as a general officer, ma'am, what do you attribute your success, or what are some of the nuggets, things that you did to help you be successful? So I took that to heart, and I gave it some thought, probably at least 2 or 3 weeks. I really did. And I started pinning. At the time, David Letterman was, popular with, David Letterman's top 10. Remember that? He started off, number 10, and I worked backwards. So I stole that and said, okay, we're going to call it Bingham's top 10. And that's really what happened. And I started pinning these. And then there's nothing special about the +4 except, 11 didn't sound right to say Bingham's top 11. I just started saying, +1, +2, and now I before I retired, I was up to +4. I would tell you and anyone, I believe that first bullet is the absolute most important thing about representing yourself, and it is to keep a positive attitude. I believe that a positive attitude will take us all one half the distance. I cannot begin to tell you how many people have said to me, ma'am, you never seem like you have a bad day. You always come to work happy. You just seem like you are always so positive. And I think there's a lot to that. If my husband were to come behind me now, he's a key reason. My daughter Tava, my son Philip, my family members, they keep me very, very happy and rooted and grounded. But I think a positive attitude really is the special sauce that helps you stand out. I'll never forget when I was at Fort Lee, and I spent a lot of time there over the years. It's where I did my basic officer basic course. And so I grew up there as a lieutenant and went back and got rebuffed. But one time I was going through the office, and normally I would go come to my office by way of going through everybody that worked directly for me, going through their cubicles or their offices. I just jump my head in and say, "Hey, how you doing? Good morning."
Mm-hmm.
And people sort of, I didn't think anything of it. I'm from Alabama. We speak to everybody. I mean, that's the way I was raised. And so that was just my way of speaking to everybody before the day started. Well, one day, one of my teammates came in and she says to me, she says, "Ma'am, what's wrong?" And I looked at her. She said, "Did I do something wrong?" And I said, "No." I said, "Why do you say that?" And she said, "Well, ma'am, you didn't come in this morning and speak to me." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I did not. I didn't realize I had done that. I had gotten probably preoccupied with, just preparing for the day." But the lesson to me is that my people were feeding on that positivity, and I didn't even know it. And when I didn't do it, because she had become so accustomed, she liked the engagement, however short it was. And so that was just a small lesson and a small reminder to me. Okay, always, don't stop what you're doing, because people are watching you. They're being lifted up and inspired by that. And I try to do that. I think the fourth bullet, work productively every day, is critical. Learn your craft well and read. I wish before I became a general officer, I wish I had read more. But when I became one, my husband gifted me the Chief of Staff of the Army's reading list of books. And so he loaded those all up on a Kindle for me. And when I traveled, I would be reading books and reading news article. And now I just can't seem to get enough of it. I used to keep my TV on CNN throughout the day. It got, between the pandemic, I had to break away from that a little bit. But you do have to keep yourself well versed on what's happening in the world, and learn your craft and learn it well. I think it's important to be a team player 24/7.
Absolutely.
I like to think that, together everyone achieves more. That's kind of what my description of what a team is and what it means. The letters together, everyone achieves more. But I think it's very, very important because the Army is a team sport. And
Absolutely.
so you can't be effective and you can't be all you can be unless you're working collaboratively as a team. And I think that's important. The bullet that says be relevant and value added to every team you are part of. I use that on every interview I'm having right now. I use that. I use that to say, I think I could be relevant and value added to this organization. If you're not relevant and you're not value added to the team or to the organization, you're not. And people will just dismiss you. And before you know it, you're a relic and you're not really being called upon to optimize or maximize any talent because people haven't seen that talent. And that's why I'm saying collectively, learn your craft and learn it well, and read to help broaden you and maximize your knowledge base, and you would truly be the better for it. Because I went to a football school, and my brother is a big Dallas Cowboy fan, my sister too. I learned football, and I got good at it because between my brother telling me about the sport, my husband telling me about the sport, he's big in it as well. I talked a lot of smack. So every time University of Alabama was run, I was running around the Pentagon of blade saying roll tide, and people, they just it was just sort of funny because some of the guys used to say, "Well, wow, you know a lot about football." And I think what they really want to say, for a girl, you really know a lot about football. But your skill sets, learn to play golf. I started trying to take golf lessons 20 years ago, Otis. I am still no better today than I was 20 years ago. I do enjoy when time permits getting out there. It's fun. It's such a relaxed environment. And honestly, I really enjoy it. And it's, I don't play with people that are serious about it because I'm not in that category, but I do like the sport. And so again, broaden your skill sets, all around, not only your professional, but also your personal ones. I think building relationships cannot be undersold. But relationships, I like to say, are like flowers. If you don't water them, every now and then, what's going to happen?
They're going to
die. And it's always amazing to me when I have established a relationship with someone that worked with me or for me, and I don't hear from them in 5-7 years later because something has happened. They're in trouble or they need a letter of recommendation. Hey, ma'am, I know I haven't, seen you in a while, but can you either write a letter on my behalf or I'm in trouble, I did something wrong. Can you be a character witness for me? Well, I'd love to be, except I don't know where you've been for the last 5 or 7 years. So that's going to be difficult for me to play that role. So anyway, all that to say, build a relationship and sustain those relationships. It's important. As you continue to climb the ladder, you will run into those people again and again and again, and they will be in positions to help you. And I think it's important. You've already heard me talk about the golden rule. I mean, I was raised in the church. My parents, my mom in particular, instilled in all of us to remember the golden rule: do unto others as you would want to be done unto. And I've carried that with me. I think it's important. I think we should treat everyone with dignity and respect. And so that's, I said I wasn't going to cover them all, but I think I almost covered them all. But that's my first set of top 10. There's nothing rocket science about that. Is it hard to be consistent at doing that? And that's probably the difference. So if you come up with your own set of, platitudes, the key is being consistent at doing them and doing them well. And that's where sometimes the difficulty comes at. One of my favorites is in quotes there in the middle. I had the good fortune to work for the 46th Quartermaster General. I'll let you guys do your homework and figure out who that person was. Just a fantastic coach and mentor for me and so many others. But he said to me one day, Gwen, you can have all the medals and ribbons on your chest. He said, but at the end of the day, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Another powerful, reminder to care. And as a leader, we have a responsibility to provide not only good leadership, but to sustain our people and to care for our people, train them, of course, but also to let them know that we care about them and their families. I'll pause there, Otis, and see if anyone has questions of me or any comments.
So I saw there's a comment that actually comes with our prior discussion, ma'am. So let's go ahead and bring that up. It comes from Ms. Teresa Abraham. I don't know if you know Ms. Teresa Abraham personally or not, but let's go ahead and bring it up. It says, the story sounds so familiar, and I'm so inspired to see that you continue to persevere through your career. And this is the second part. It said, it was my 8th grade teacher who attempted to program me to be a failure. Yet I persevered 25 years later, now retired, Master Sergeant, US Army, and PhD psychology. Keep going, Dr. Abraham.
Fantastic.
Dr. Abraham.
That is exceptional. And I think we have to get it in our psyche that, as I think I said this before, everybody's not going to like you. And sometimes it's not even apparent why they don't. I never felt the need to figure out why somebody didn't like me. I just didn't have the time to give it too much credence, to be honest with you, because for the one or two that may not have liked me, there were 10 or 12 or 20 that were very supportive and assisted me in my endeavors. And so good on you, Dr. Abraham. I'm so proud of you and to have that title. And I know you worked your buns off to get there. So you go. That's fantastic.
Ma'am, can I ask a question, a follow-up question on what you said earlier? You said you don't give credence to those that aren't really there for the positive part of you or aren't really there to support you.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may have difficulty in ignoring those that just dislikes you for no reason. How do you mentally get past those that have some sort of issue against you personally?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me caveat to say this. If the person works in your office, it's kind of hard to get beyond them, right? I mean, my last 3 years were in the Pentagon, and you're close quarters in the staff where I work. And if if the occasion would be that somebody in your office, or say even your supervisor or your senior report, you feel, maybe you don't know it just yet, but you get a sensing that you don't like them, or they don't like you for some reason. My first advice is always going to be to engage that person. It's hard to do. It's a tough conversation to have. But part of it is my Christian background. I mean, it's just my teaching, and my mom taught us to love everybody. And we read the Bible. We went to vacation Bible school, and my uncle was a preacher. And so part of the way I get through tough times is I rely on my faith. And that has gotten me through tough times. But the older I've become, and it didn't take me to be a general to be older, but after I started having my children, I'll say it like that, I got a lot more, a feeling of empowered to speak to someone that I felt had a beef with me, or perhaps I had a beef with them. And at that point, I said to myself, you have nothing to lose, because this isn't a good situation that you're living, you're working through. And so my first thought is to engage and try to find good footing, because I do believe in teamwork. I think working as a team, you can't work as a team if you're harboring ill will towards your battle buddy, your teammate on the left or your right. And so I would say to try to engage. That's the counsel I give. A lot of people call me about this particular, situation that they find themselves in. I tell them, I said, my strategy is to engage kindly and tactfully, with dignity and respect, and just have a conversation to say, hey, I seem to rub you the wrong way, or perhaps you're not liking the work I do. But you just got to have that candid conversation. And I think most people are surprised when they do that, because they usually call me back and say, ma'am, it worked. Things are going a lot better. And so that would be my first recommendation. If you attempt to do the right thing and still it falls flat, move on. I mean, you just got to move on. Try not to harbor any ill will, but you have to know in your head that, again, everyone's not going to like you, and perhaps there's nothing you can ever do to satisfy the reason why they don't like you. When I was a 2-star commander, I got promoted to 2 stars before I left White Sands Missile Range. And I had a gentleman come up to me the day I was leaving out, so the day of my change of command. And the gentleman came through the receiving line. He said to me, he says, General Bingham, I just need to tell you something. He says, I need to clear my conscience. When I first found out you were coming here and I learned that you were a woman, I didn't like it one bit. He says, I know, I shouldn't have felt that way. I'm not proud of that, but I'm just telling you the truth. We had never had a woman commander, and I didn't like the fact that you were coming. He says, but since you've been here the last almost 2 years now, he says, I want to let you know you've been the best commander that we've ever had. And I just want to shake your hand and wish you luck. And I told him, I said, well, sir, I appreciate your candor. Thank you so much for telling me that. It means a lot. And I really, truly believe that we made a great team together. So God bless you and thank you. And so, you know, I was the first woman in that position. And so again, intuitively, you know, I have to know that somebody's not going to like the fact that I'm the first of anything. You know, when you are the first, there is a bit of a burden. I mean, think about the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, Q Brown, that is a first. I mean, he's got a heavy burden, so to speak, but I know, like you and everyone, he's well qualified and very definitely up to the challenge. But sometimes it can be hard to be the first, but you've got to continue to believe in the things that got you there and to continue to lean on your people and learn from your people, because you won't know everything. It's impossible to learn everything about an organization, you know, in a matter of months.
Mm-hmm.
You seem like you had a question.
I do. And I understand being the first on anything will be tough. I understand, you know, being a trailblazer in any situation or organization or, you know, workplace is going to be tough. But we're in 2020. Are there any more excuses that can be made for those who may not be comfortable with someone of color or a woman, or, you know, there's really no excuse really to be uncomfortable around someone that doesn't look like you. And I say that point to add on, how could mentorship or sponsorship assist in that difficult transition that someone may have in a situation like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one would want to believe, Otis, in 2020, we still don't have racism yet. We evidenced racism for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in the brutal killing, senseless murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. I would like to be able to tell you that people will be accepting of every gender, will be accepting of every race. But honestly, some of what is happening in our country today has brought out the fact, for me, of just how pervasive racism really is in this country.
Yes, absolutely.
It almost caught me off guard, because not that I'm naive, but it seems so prevalent in so many different walks of life. And you only have to look at the headlines to see just how prevalent. And, you know, I'll read a few. You know, we're hearing about the various, now this is potentially a good thing. It depends on where one sits, but the Confederate statues that are coming down across the nation and even in foreign countries. The subject of renaming military bases named after Confederate generals is being prompted. And how about this one? No more Confederate flag being flown at NASCAR. Because there's one full-time stock car driver, Bubba Wallace, who asked for support, and NASCAR stood behind him and with him. And I think that's a good news story. I read another story about the CEO of CrossFit stepping down because of inappropriate racial comments that were made on I think it was a Zoom call, I believe. About a week or two ago, I read where a retired Navy captain was fired due to racial slurs on an open Facebook stream. And so, and there, you know, Facebook, speaking of Facebook, is coming under mounting pressure from major companies to rein in hateful content on the platform or risk further loss of ad revenue. That was posted yesterday. So we're hearing more and more about some of those ugly topics, and yet I remain hopeful because we're also looking at a world where it's not just blacks that are standing up for the Black Lives Matter. I'm hopeful because it's other majority whites and Asians and Latino are joining blacks in the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think that's a good news story in that sense.
It absolutely is.
But you had a question, and I don't think I got to your question.
No, I think you answered it in the way that I understand where you're coming from, ma'am. I appreciate it. You know, just to add on to those who are assisting with the move of racial injustice and having those discussions and actually enacting actions to bring some sort of muscle to the talk. We've got to celebrate those leaders as well, ma'am.
That's right.
I did notice that. I think, and I'm passed by his name, but the Commandant General in Korea, oh my goodness, the things that he's been doing, General Bingham, he's a rock star in my eyes. The things that he's been doing
phenomenal work. Yeah, doing phenomenal work there, and certainly a stalwart. And I've always enjoyed every engagement I've had with him, and he has truly done some magnanimous work for our service members there.
Okay, so we've got a question coming in from YouTube, ma'am, and I think we've kind of transitioned into the question time, and I'm hoping that you're here with me, and we're going to answer these questions.
I'm here. I'm your wingman, or your wingwoman.
Wing woman, I appreciate that. You know, I'm going to say to the people that's checking out the discussion, hey, send in your questions, send in your comments from YouTube, from Facebook, wherever you're at. Send them on, and we're going to post them. General Bingham and I will bring them up, and we're going to have a discussion on it. So a question that I see coming in from YouTube, and it comes from General. All right, so it says from Clara Adams.
My friend, hero.
Excellent, excellent. She says, General Gwen, would you agree that 3 skills that are mandatory for success are reading, writing, and speaking? I can tell you that General Gwen is a small woman with a big voice.
General Clara Adams Ender is one of our heroes and sheroes, I should say, just one of my favorite people. Well accomplished in her own right, and we're just so very, very proud of her. And look her up, friends, and that are on this net. General Clara Adams Ender. Look her up and be amazed at what she has done and continues to do. I absolutely agree with General Clara that reading, writing, and speaking are 3 great skill sets. Once you master those, reading, writing, and speaking, you can represent yourself first. And here's just a simple example. You know, when you're new to any room, let's just say you go to your first meeting in your capacity, whatever that is. You walk into normally a conference room, and you sit down, and everybody looks around the table, and you know, they're sizing. We're sizing each other up. I mean, we just do that, right? And you know, wonder what he's like or wonder what she's like. Well, when you open your mouth, and what comes out of your mouth will either confirm or deny what I thought. That may not be fair. It may not be a fair assessment, but when you speak as if you know what you're talking about, you're going to become a credible person in the eyes of someone who's assessing you. And that's the true statement. And so my mom used to always say, you know, watch your grammar. She would always correct our grammar. You know, don't use broken grammar, always use correct grammar. And she would always, you know, correct us. I'll never forget, I was a battalion adjutant and S1 with personnel officer for my battalion commander as I think I was a first lieutenant. And I was, you know, like most lieutenants, you're cocky, you think you know a lot and you really don't. But still think it anyway. And so I signed off, or I prepared awards. I had my people prepare them and I reviewed them for his signature. I'll never forget, Otis, the first stack of certificates came out looking like they were bled out. I mean, there was so much there was so much red ink on misspelled words, capitalization missing. I mean, it was bad. It was bad. I was embarrassed professionally. And I said, that will never, ever happen to me again. And so
you could say that was your humbling moment. That was your humbling moment.
It was humbling. And we needed to be humble. This same battalion commander at Fort Lewis, Washington, my first duty station, he got us all together. He says, Lieutenants, as good as you all think you are, you can all be replaced. And I was taken aback. And I thought to myself, how dare he? Doesn't he know we're good? And I mean, again, the mindset of a lieutenant, when you know enough to really be dangerous, and you probably are, because I was straight out of OBC. But I never forgot the message. As good as you think you are, you can all be replaced. And that really is a true statement. And so don't take for granted, don't squander an opportunity that you have, because sometimes you get one shot. Sometimes you get one shot, and if you mess it up, sometimes there's not a redo. Many times you can you can kind of reclaim some footage by doing better the second time around. But depending on how up, I guess the further up you go, the higher up you go in the hierarchy. Sometimes it's just that one shot and it's yours. You hear people say, okay, you got it, don't screw it up, right? I mean, you probably heard leaders who have said, don't screw it up. You got the main man or the main woman coming to see your formation, your organization, don't screw it up. But I think she's absolutely right. Reading, writing, and speaking makes us better, and it makes us whole. It makes us diverse. And like I said, when I got out of the Army and I had a board interview, I felt so I over prepared, I'm sure. But by the time came around and I walked into the boardroom, I felt so self-assured that I was ready. And it turned out it was a great interview. Probably not too much that I couldn't answer well. And you just will continue to build on your knowledge base. The more spoken you are, you become spoken because you read. And that's why I start out with by saying, learn your craft and read. You cannot overread. I mean, you should be reading something every swinging day of your life. I want to always consider myself a lifelong learner. And in fact, I enjoy learning new things. And so you always want to find yourself reading and writing in such a way that it's broadening you, so that you walk out not only with competence, but you walk out with confidence in your abilities.
Okay, so we've got a few more questions. Let's go ahead and jump into one right here. And it says, let's see, these are more military associated type questions. It says, ma'am, it's good to see you again. What would your advice be for transitioning from each phase of your Army career, i.e. to company grade, to field grade, to battalion, then to brigade level?
Yeah, that's a great question. So remember those Bingham's top 10. Don't lose sight of those. And Otis, you can send them a copy of that if you have a way to do that. So remember, your different transitions are building blocks. And so the thought is you build onto, you don't subtract from. So you're just continually building until your skill sets match you being company grade to field grade to your lieutenant colonel, battalion, brigade, command years, and embrace the transitions. Be excited. Continue to build on your network, build those relationships we talked about. And before you know it, you're going to find that you're more prepared than you thought you were. And when you anticipate certain things like, going into that battalion for the first time, you're so giddy, you're so excited. I'll never forget it. I was a battalion command of an AIT battalion, Advanced Individual Training Battalion at Fort Lee. And my first day, I just felt so self-assured in the sense that I was ready and prepared. And so it was a great 2 years. It went by so fast, and really enjoyed every bit of it. But I think I would say to my friend who knows me is just to say to keep marching forward and keep building upon your foundational assets, such that as you go and grow through the years, you'll see and feel like you're that competent and confident person that we've been talking about.
Excellent, excellent. So we've got another question, and thank you for that prior question, by the way. We got another question coming in from Colonel Bernard House. What's going on, sir? That's my mentor. What's up? He says, ma'am, what TTPs do you have to engage seniors who do not look like you? Was your approach different when talking to?
Is it who do not look like you? Is it who do not look like you, or who do not like you?
Oh, my bad. Who do not like you? Okay. that could be a separate subject right there. I apologize.
No, that's
who do not like you. Was your approach different when talking to different subordinates / peers versus seniors?
Well, of course, my approach talking to subordinates and peers is going to be different than when I'm talking to my superiors. We all want to make a positive impression on our seniors. And so, you can shuck and jive as you will with your peers. I wouldn't do that with my subordinates, but the pucker factor goes up a bit when you are engaging with your superiors, and depending on what kind of relationship you have with them. The question he poses is, what are the TTPs for dealing with somebody who you believe does not like you? Okay.
Yeah.
Two comments readily come to mind. One, this is, and I would say it in this order. This is where I would reach out to a mentor first, and tell the mentor, hey, I'm working for, Lieutenant Colonel so-and-so, Colonel so-and-so, Dr. so-and-so, my boss or my big boss. And I get the impression that he doesn't like me, he or she. How should I overcome that? Because it could be that you think that person doesn't like you, when in fact that may not be the case. It may be that you're thinking one thing and maybe they have a different persona. I'd have to know more about it. But my second approach would be, you should be counseled every 3 months, every 3 to 6 months. Yeah. And if you don't get counseled, if you're not asked to be counseled, or they don't come to you saying, hey, subordinate, I need to counsel you, you should go to them. Hey, ma'am, sir, I'd like to get on your calendar for our periodic counseling. And during the periodic counseling, you want, what I would do is tell my subordinate, here's your strengths. Here's your areas that you need to shore up a bit, and here's a strategy which you can use to try to get to where I want you to be in terms of your skill sets. And so that is that's an engaging conversation. It shouldn't be the superior saying something to you without feedback from the person they're delivering that message to, right? And so you should have that conversation, even if you think it's a hard one to have. You need to have it, because if you're in the military, whether that's, if you're in the service, the Army or any service in your military, that's a requirement. counseling. And even if your government civilian, it's a requirement. And so those conversations need to be had. A little bit different in mainstream or corporate world on the assessment standpoint. But I truly believe that the best way to understand where you sit is to have a conversation with your senior. And I think if you're bold enough on yourself, or not bold, but confident enough in your own abilities to generate that conversation respectfully, then do it. If not, use your mentor and have him or her try to give you a strategy like I just talked to you through to engage. But you need to have that conversation because, as I like to say, spoiled milk doesn't get better with time, or bad news doesn't get better with time. Only thing it's going to do is make you more mad and resentful. Yep. And that's not, then you're letting someone steal your joy.
Correct.
And remember, I said early on, don't let any man steal your joy or steal your dreams. And you've got to stay true to that. You really do.
Excellent, excellent. Ma'am, we've got actually a follow-up question with Colonel House again. He asked, great comments, ma'am. Based on everything that is occurring dealing with race, why is it so hard for some in uniform to have this difficult conversation and acknowledge that we have racism within our ranks?
That's a great question. The topic of race has, I think, I can genuinely say, probably has been a hard conversation to have since the beginning of time. And I believe, as a result of everything that's happening now with the protests that we're seeing in support of Black Lives Matter and social justice, the call for social justice reform, in the Army, we're going to have those conversations. I mean, you're not going to be able to put it off. And I say that because I believe, as we sit here, you and I chatting and others listening, that we are a nation that's hurting right now. We are a nation divided right now, more than I personally have ever seen it. I've never in my 60 years, and those years, adult years, never seen it where we seem to be so divided right now as a nation. And so we've got to have those difficult conversations to really fully begin the healing process associated with the why behind it. So in the Army, we talk about sexual harassment. We talk about sexual assault. There's mandated training throughout the year on those two offenses. This might be a new ad. I don't know. I haven't talked to any senior leader about it, but it's probably a good idea, certainly in the short term, to add the conversation about race and racial justice and race relations. I think that needs to be up there with sexual harassment, sexual assault. We need to add race and have those conversations. Many times, I read an article. I told my husband I need to find it. There was an article I came across last week, and the lady, it was written from a white lady's perspective. The article was entitled, "I Just Learned I'm a Racist at 32," or something like that. And it was a compelling story. But I think she lives in Arizona. I'm going to find the article again, but I think she lives in Arizona. She talked about her best friend was a Black, they were young girls together in school.
Yeah.
And they just did everything together and grew up from grade school to middle and high school. And she was now 32. And I guess when the protest broke out, the white lady who was saying, "I just discovered I'm a racist at 32," was looking for some validation from her friend that, she had been a good friend to her And she was glad that they had a good relationship, and that she had not done any of those things. Well, the Black lady did not validate. It's almost like, hey, Otis, I treated you good, didn't I? Didn't I, Otis? Didn't I? And Otis
Yeah.
remained
Yeah.
silent. And so the Black lady started taking her through, early beginning of what she did to her, that she laughed off, but it really hurt her. But she was too afraid to say anything because she didn't want to lose friends. She was either one or one of a few Blacks that was in the school, and she didn't want to be bullied, and she didn't want to lose friends. So she, I remember she said that they called her the token Black, and everybody laughed at it. And the Black girl played it off, but in fact inside it was bothersome.
Yeah.
She never said it. It's a powerful,
that's social pressure. Ooh, that's social pressure, man.
Article, but maybe I'll try to find it, Otis. I just read it about a week ago, within the week. And I'm a racist. I just learned, or I'm a racist at 32. But it was just a way through time that she delivered comments that really portrayed her through somebody else's eyes differently than what she saw herself as. And so I think that's the same kinds of conversations that we need to have. The military is a microcosm of society. Yes. So we are not going to be exempt from what's happening. We may not be rising on Fort Pick-a-Place, Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, Fort Lewis.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that there won't be Blacks and whites that are equally hurting for some reason or another in association with what's happening with these protests. And so we definitely need to have those conversations, have them in a good environment, with the right frame of mind. But leaders will have to listen. They will have to listen and get good at listening, because it's my husband and I are sports fanatics, and we always tune in, most mornings, ESPN, either First Take or another one that comes on in the morning, and then we look at news or vice versa. But we were listening to the the whole notion of the Confederate flag and Bubba Watson, and there's a sports analyst who's on there, and he was just talking about how outraged he was with how people were threatening to leave the sport. And then there was an article about a noose found in his garage earlier this week, and et cetera, et cetera. And people were just coming out saying how outraged they are. And, if I got to have you for a friend, I don't need you for that kind of person for a friend. But I think it's going to take us all having those kinds of conversations, and they won't be comfortable. I mean, they just won't, because you may not share the same opinion. I mean, there are politicians on TV now who says we don't have a race problem in our country. I mean, you've heard them like I've heard them. And there will be a multitude, thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands that vehemently disagree with that comment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having these discussions is fine. Having the uncomfortable conversations is okay. I encourage that. But we need to actually, once those conversations are done and we're back in our safe spaces, we're back in our places that we associate ourselves with, we actually enact the solutions and the suggestions that came from those discussions itself. And just as a quick plug, ma'am, I got the Sergeant Major of the Army joining me on the platform tomorrow, and we're going to have those discussions there. And I think it's going to be an eye-opening experience that people look forward to. And I just want to just as a quick plug for myself. So, ma'am, I want to add on a couple more questions, and then I want to give you just the free time just to talk about your current ventures that you got going on, and closing words, of course. So I've got two more questions. Well, some comments and two more questions. Let's
Okay.
share some of the comments that I've seen during our time, of course. We've got one from Miss Sade Leon. She said, "Hey, ma'am, we have so many pictures together. It was always a pleasure running into you. Congratulations on your retirement."
Thank
Excellent.
you. Thank you, Sade.
Excellent. Excellent. We've got another one coming saying, "You've got to be grounded in yourself and your values. Treat others with respect, in spite of the fact people do not like you." Kill.
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
the term there is "kill them with kindness." Just
Kill them
you
with
know,
kindness.
people need love. You got to love on
That's
people.
right.
Love
That's
people,
right.
and love people, and treat people right.
Right.
And even if they don't come around to loving you, you know in yourself that you've done the right thing personally.
I
So
agree with that.
that's. Mhm. We've got one from Miss Sharon Twin Denson. She said, "Hello, ma'am. Looking great, and we miss you." She's definitely a legend. All right, all
Thank you
right. We
so much.
appreciate it.
Thank
We
you.
got one from, let's see, Major Stouffer. She's in my battalion. What's going on, Jody? How you doing? She said, "Love the cuckoo clock." Thanks for your service and all the wonderful advice. You are a remarkable woman. Well, thank you for the comment towards
Thank you so much, Jody.
General.
Appreciate you.
And so we've got let's see, we got one more comment saying, "Ma'am, thank you for your service." And we'll go into the last question, and then we'll go into talking about your ventures, ma'am. And the question is, we have a lot of junior officers who seem to want to ignore all of our other brothers and sisters in arms and only focus on Black soldiers. What would you say to them as a leader right now to ensure that balance is maintained?
Okay, well, thank you so much for the question, Angel. And I probably need a little bit more context, but I would just say that we are all brothers and sisters in arms. And I think when I start out talking, you know, there was a song I remember in Vacation Bible School, red, black, and yellow, black and white. They're precious in our sight. Jesus loves the children of the world. I hope that we are not ignoring people based on color, because my teammate, my battle buddy on my left may be Black, my battle buddy on my right is white, and I may have Hispanic, Asian all throughout the formation. And remember, I used the word team. Army is a team sport. It can't be about only focusing on one population segment, because you can't have a team if you don't have everybody rowing in the same direction. And so I'm not exactly sure of the context exactly, or why that would be happening in your formation, unless the conversation is dealing with race and race relations as in terms of what's happening. But even to have a conversation on race and race relations, you've got to talk about everybody and not just one persuasion. For instance, when I go to a new organization, I look at the leader board. That's the first thing I look at. You know, how diverse is the leader board? Is it represented with minorities? Is it represented with both genders? That's important to me, and I like to see a rainbow. When I was a commanding general, my aide-de-camps were of every color out there. I had Hispanic aide-de-camp, I had a white aide-de-camp, I had men, I had women, I had Black aide-de-camp. I covered the whole spectrum of what our society looks like. I think I liken diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's sort of kind of what I'm transitioning to. I liken it to a quilt. And if you think about a quilt and the squares, you know, it's each one of those squares that are stitched together to make that quilt. Each one of the squares of our Army is an individual. And as an individual, it's unique with special skill sets. And it's beautiful what every one of those squares brings to that quilt. But when you stitch those squares all together and you build out the quilt, what you have is a masterpiece. It's a product to be admired a keepsake for everybody to admire and to look at as a masterpiece. And so that's what, I think about when I think about the Army team or our military, is using that quill analogy where everyone is an individual, but collectively we make the team. And the more diverse that team is, it brings the richness of culture, the richness of skill sets, the richness of gender, uh, think thoughtful considerations that perhaps I didn't consider and you do because of your experience base, etc. So conversation cannot only be about the black brothers or sisters in the unit, if that's getting after Angel's question. I think it's
Yes.
about becoming a team and a stronger team, because if one of your battle buddies, and I use that term only because I was a battalion commander and I sort of started using that to talk about my teammate as my battle buddy. If my teammate is doing well, that means we all collectively should feel like a sense of goodness and a sense of being whole. But if one of my teammates or one of my battle buddies is suffering for some reason, we can't be whole until we make him or her whole, because something is on his or her mind that's preventing them from being their best self. And we need to address that. And so that's where I think we find ourselves when we look at what's happening in the world or our nation across the world, with the pandemic, the loss of incomes associated, how many millions of people who have been without work, lost their jobs, military spouses are in that population. There was a survey where 30% of the military spouses were now without employment. Can you imagine being used to a certain income and all of a sudden that's either cut in half or cut substantially? That's a lot of stress and that's a lot of angst in our ranks.
Absolutely.
And I think we as leaders must be mindful of all of that stress that is happening and goes along with that. And, that's where it takes me back to what I was saying earlier, where, we are a nation that's hurting right now. And we see that being played out in the number of protests that are still occurring across our own nation, but are occurring even in other countries.
Yes.
Last night I was listening to Jimmy Fallon, and Russell Crowe was one of his featured guests. And Russell Crowe is the actor who lives, he's Australian, and he was talking about all the bigotry and the inequalities associated with earlier times in Australia when they treated the Aborigines really, really bad because of their skin color, and how now there was a need to atone and do better and do right by this group of people. And he was explaining some of the things he was leading up in his organizations to fight racism inside of Australia. It was a really good interview, and I commended him, to myself for him being aware and taking action, as you so aptly indicated, Otis. And so many people across the land are doing the same thing. They're speaking out against what happened to George Floyd and police brutality and in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. And that's where we find ourselves. We cannot put our heads in the sand and think it's not out there. It is out there in a very real way, even if it's not real or perhaps you can't relate to it. It's a good thing to be able to listen and understand what people are really feeling. And I think until we do that as a country, we can see our way to a better place. But I am hopeful, very hopeful for all of the things that we have seen.
Excellent. We've got a few comments based on our discussion, and then I'll go ahead with the closing comments and share whatever ventures you've got going on. Let's go ahead and read some of these comments. Someone said, in this current environment, we tracking that. Yes, race and race relations. She's just following up on her earlier comment that she said. She said multicultural diversity is a stronger community. This is a Major Retired Ford. She's another one of my mentors. She's awesome as well. And
Fantastic.
Colonel House added, "We are stronger together." Final comment for our discussion. This is from earlier, Miss Jackson. She said, "Ma'am, it's been really hard to get across to some junior officers that even now, it's important that we don't lose sight of the fact that we have many races wearing the uniform, and we have to remember that. Can't forget that." And she said, "Ma'am, you hit the nail right on the head." Ma'am, I want to give you the opportunity now just to share in closing, some of the ventures that you've got going on. And of course, if people want to reach out to you, we see the information on the bottom there that they can reach out to you. But I heard that there's a book going on. You want to share that with us?
Well, thanks for remembering that, albeit, Otis, I am writing. I'm not writing as fast as I had hoped to write because I'm having so much fun. Number one, enjoying the fact that me and my husband are together under the same roof here in Austin, Texas, and it's been wonderful to really excel and transition after 38 years of service. But I am committed. I've begun writing a book. I'm hopeful that by the spring of next year that we'll be able to go to press with it. And the book is intended not to be an autobiography or anything like that. It's intended to speak about some of the vignettes you heard this evening, but to really encourage and inspire others to really be their best self, and to know that if you put your mind and heart to doing something, that you can achieve it. So it goes back to a couple nuggets that I've said. Don't let anyone steal your joy or steal your dreams. And if you believe it and can conceive it, with hard work, perseverance, you can achieve it. Honestly, when I tell you I came into the Army for 4 years and not a day longer, I was convinced. I was convinced that I would do my 4-year obligation and I was going to get out, use my business management degree, and go into the business world. Well, the business world turned out to be the US Army. And I really, really have enjoyed. Just a few closing comments. First of all, I am very, very proud to have worn the cloth of our nation. I consider myself a soldier for life, and I'm very grateful for all of what I was able to be, see, and do. I'm grateful for the men and women that I had the privilege to team with along the way, and to get to know and to learn from and to work with. It has been a sheer joy. I want to thank all of you who have raised your right hand and sworn that oath of allegiance to our Constitution and something bigger than yourself as individuals. We thank you, and we appreciate all the work that you do on a daily basis. When you step out every single day, always make sure that your audio, in fact, matches your video. You cannot tell someone as a leader to do something or do anything that you're not willing to do yourself. So God bless each and every one of you. Otis, it's been a thrill to join you this afternoon. I've enjoyed it. God bless you all, and I look forward to seeing you at another time.
Ma'am, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing this time with us. I'm looking forward to a future conversation. If you want to come on and just talk with me, let me know. We'll make it happen, ma'am.
That sounds great. Well, all the best of luck to you. I look forward to seeing you around the trails there.
Thank you, ma'am. Hang out in the broadcast room. Let's talk for a little bit, okay, ma'am?
Okay, great. Thank you, guys.
And so, in parting, we had, that was an awesome, let's see, almost 100 minutes of good conversation, just, great mentorship, great words being shared by General Retired Bingham. I really am lucky to be in a situation and a platform where I have military, business, community leaders coming and sharing their words of wisdom, words of advice. And I encourage you all to join on as much as you possibly can. Encourage others to come on and be part of this conversation, be part of this movement that we've got going. It's something that I'm sure people of many different cultures, backgrounds, creeds, races, points of views, political points can benefit from. So as I always say in parting, take care of yourself, take care of your family, and take care of others. Y'all take care now. Bye.